Hey everybody. This week we're going to do our Module 1 announcement just a little bit different than what we usually do. We still have some text up here and some really awesome outside resources to support your learning in this video, but we're not going to really have any of our specialized videos until midweek because we have a lot of information to kind of explore this week, and I want to touch base on all of it before we really dive into our content development for the week. First of all, I want to say that you guys did really great last week with our in-depth analysis. Our projects towards our critical analysis are really moving forward. You guys are doing awesome. I want to remind you that as we're writing, to really keep in mind who we're writing for. Keep that audience in mind. We're all doing great, kind of breaking out of the little box of our classroom and thinking of who else we're writing for besides your instructor and your fellow classmates. So we're really doing great with who our audience is, and let's just keep in mind that there's people outside of our classroom who are interested in what we're reading too, and make sure that we are writing for our specific audience as we move forward. Secondly, I want to remind you guys that our critical analysis is not about the topic. It's not about the content that McFadden or Tam or Braxma wrote about. We are exploring in our critical analysis how effective these authors were. Do you agree with their points? Did they do a good job getting their points across to their specific audience? Were they effective? Our critical analysis is not going to further develop the content that these authors started. We're not developing the conversation further. We're leading the conversation toward an analysis of how effective these authors were. Okay, so we don't want to use any outside resources. We don't really want to focus on personal experience. We really just want to talk about whether or not these guys did a good job in terms of presenting their argument and getting us to understand or agree or disagree with them. Okay, so I think it might be a good idea for you to review the critical analysis rubric. This is something that we're going to really talk about in the coming weeks as we move towards that project. But maybe take a look at it. There's a link right here that you can access it with, and review the content of what we're supposed to be doing. Just remember that our critical analysis is not analyzing the topic, but analyzing the author and that specific essay. Okay, and if you have any questions, let me know. Hit up the general questions discussion forum, or maybe you can email me or text, or we can Skype, whatever we need to do to support your success. Okay. This week we're going to explore a few topics, including quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing, as well as integrating our sources and avoiding plagiarism. We're also going to take a quiz to determine if we'll be using MLA or APA in terms of our writing style, and from this point on, we really want our artifacts, our papers that we're submitting, to be written in either MLA or APA. So what are our key takeaways for this week? First, I want to touch base on this concept that's called the incubation period. When we write, we do a lot of critical thinking, analyzing, brainstorming. Sorry, I just noticed a spelling error. Let's fix that. We're going to be doing a lot of analyzing, critical thinking, asking questions, revisiting those questions. There's my fan. And then a lot of writing. And for many of us, writing is pretty intense. Every writer I know, be they novice or experts, really need to take a step back after starting the writing process. And we call that step back the incubation period because it allows us to kind of passively think about the content that we just wrote. You guys just wrote a big submission towards our critical analysis. So now we're going to take this week to kind of not really actively think about it. We're going to avoid active reading. We're going to avoid adding content. And we're really just going to focus on building some skills that support our writing and not really focus on our writing at all this week. And what that does is it lets it incubate. It lets it kind of steep in the back of our minds for a little bit. It's like letting a little bit of cheese age to get that really great texture before you start using it in a recipe. So this week, we're putting our writing project on the back burner and letting it steep. And then next week, when we start revising and adding content, we'll be able to do so with a fresh perspective. You know, sometimes when you're working on a project, you just got to take a step back and revisit it later on, and that's what we're doing with this week. In your future writing projects, I highly encourage you to have an incubation period, whether or not it's part of your class. Write your project out, do your first draft, take a step back, take a break, and then come revisit it after you've let your eyes sort of reset, your brain sort of reset towards that topic. Another thing that we're exploring this week is using evidence to support our argument. Evidence is the bits and pieces from that essay that you're going to use to prove and support your claim. Now, we can present evidence either through direct quotations, paraphrasing, or summarization. Direct quoting is when we use a direct quote from an essay. It's where we use it word for word from the essay that we are exploring and putting it in our essay. Okay, so for example, if I'm doing the McFadden paper, I would say something like McFadden states, comma, quotation mark, so pervasive is the neutering of the English language, we no longer have people here, only persons, quotation mark, citation, followed by a period. So remember, a direct quotation, when we're quoting something, is word for word from the essay, and you absolutely need to include quotation marks because that's how you tell your audience, hey, because I'm using quotation marks, this is not my work, this is the author's direct words. Okay? Our other choice is paraphrasing, and paraphrasing is when you take an idea from the original essay and you put it in your own words. Okay, so it's using content from that essay but putting it in your own words. For example, if I'm doing the McFadden paper, an example of paraphrasing would be, McFadden claims that so many people are overly careful of the genderization of their words, we now only have persons rather than men or women, followed by the citation and the period. So it's essentially saying the same thing as the direct quotation, except instead of using McFadden's words, we're paraphrasing it into my own words. Okay, so do you see the difference there? With direct quotations, we use quotation marks and exactly word for word the original author's words. And paraphrasing, we put their words in our own words, we paraphrase, and have the same meaning, except it's just coming from our words, and we also include a citation there as well. And then summarization is where you kind of give a general summary of the content, where we keep the main idea the same, but it's like we're having a conversation about it as opposed to directly quoting or very closely paraphrasing it. So it's where we get the general idea of what the authors were saying as opposed to a more specific paraphrasing or a very specific direct quotation. For example, with the same idea that we've been talking about with the McFadden paper, the general idea McFadden presents seems to be her belief gender-neutral terms are unnecessary, cumbersome, and not a little ridiculous when used in real-world scenarios. So quoting is when it's a direct word-for-word copy of what the author said using quotation marks. Paraphrasing is when we rephrase the content in our own words. And summary is where we present the general main idea of the content. And those are three ways that you can use evidence in your paper, okay, to support your claim and your purpose. And then under Let's Explore, there's some really awesome resources that I highly encourage you to review because it's going to break down these ideas even more with some more specific examples. The next thing I want to talk about real quick is plagiarism. Plagiarism is a huge deal for several different reasons. Plagiarism is what happens when you use somebody else's content and you do not give credit where credit is due. Many of the activities this week that we are going over, including paraphrasing, direct quotation, summarizing, and integrating sources, which we'll talk about next, is to help support academic integrity, academic honesty, and intellectual property ownership. And what these are big words essentially saying that we are giving credit where credit is due. Okay, this helps protect the intellectual property of TAM or McFadden or Braxma and supporting your own academic honesty. Plagiarism is a big deal. When you do not give credit where credit is due, you are A, being dishonest, and B, you can face, whether or not you do it intentionally or not, you can face failing grades, you can face expulsion from school. In the business world outside of our classroom, you can face big legal fees, and if you actually made money from plagiarizing, you could face jail time depending on what it is that you're infringing, or you could even risk termination of the position that you're working in. So plagiarism is important. Okay, I want you to know that as we're learning this skill, learning source integration and learning how to properly directly quote and paraphrase, I'm not going to assume that what you're doing is plagiarism if it looks like that your similarity reports are really high. We're learning a new skill here, so if occasionally what we're working on looks like plagiarism, you and I are going to work together to make sure that it's not plagiarism, to make sure that we are protecting intellectual property of others, and to make sure that we're being as academically honest as we can be. So it's a learned skill, it's a work in progress, we'll get you there, okay? But we do need to be aware of what plagiarism is. And it comes about in 3 different ways. Okay, the first one is where we use exact words from an essay in our own writing. It's when we use a direct quotation, but we do not include those quotation marks or citing them. So it's if you were trying to do a direct quote, but you didn't put those quotation marks and you didn't cite it, that would be an act of plagiarism. So whenever you do a direct quotation from an original essay, make sure you put those quotation marks around it and you include the citation at the end. Okay? And then another way plagiarism comes up is when we are paraphrasing. So we're putting those words into our own words, okay? And not including the citation. So if you paraphrase, you still need to include a citation in there. And then the third way plagiarism comes about is when you use ideas or structures from an essay without acknowledging that you're doing so. And this is, say, a good example of this would be like if you're doing a poem, if you're doing an essay on a poem, and you make your paper look exactly like that poem. You're using their structure. You're using the same line breaks, you're using the same headings, you're using the same font, without acknowledging that you're basing that poem on the original author's poem. That's an example of using a structure without saying that you are. And that's plagiarism too. Typically in prose essays, using the structure, it doesn't really become a plagiarism issue, but you do need to be aware that if you're using the same exact sentence structure or the same exact headings and that kind of stuff, you need to acknowledge where that came from. Essentially, with plagiarism, what we want to do is make sure we're giving credit where credit is due. Always use direct, when you're doing direct quotations, always use the quotation marks. And if you're paraphrasing or summarizing, make sure that you're including the citation in those just like you would with a direct quotation, okay? And then under Let's Explore, there's a couple different tips and suggestions there to help you avoid plagiarism. And we've got a really awesome one that's talking about safe practices to always ensure you're not inadvertently plagiarizing too. But again, the key here is anytime you use an idea via a direct quotation or a paraphrase or a summarization, always include the citations. Okay, I keep saying this word citations. So that's the next thing that we're going to talk about. What are citations? Citations are the credentials that we use to indicate where that information came from. And one of these ways to supply credentials is by integrating our sources. Okay. Using our sources is more than just dropping a direct quotation in there, okay? We need to be able to have lead-in sentences, calling phrases. They're also known as signaling phrases or anchoring phrases to connect our words with the sources that we're using. These phrases can include something like according to, the author states, Rowan believes, Tan presents, McFadden argues, that kind of stuff that really leads in from our words to the quotation or paraphrase content that we're using. We want to use these types of signal phrase coupled with our correct citations to fully integrate the sources while maintaining our academic honesty. Now, in the Let's Explore section here, we have several sources that are talking about how to successfully integrate the sources that we're using, as well as a huge list here in the second one, a huge list of examples on signaling and anchoring phrases to help you really integrate your sources. Now, in terms of citations, that's where MLA and APA come in. How you cite your sources is going to be dictated by whether or not we're writing an MLA or APA. And again, I want you to review these MLA and APA sources. We have 2 from SNHU and 2 from Purdue OWL, and they're both exquisite collections of information on MLA and APA. And when you do your quiz this week, it's going to tell you which one of these that you want to use. So take your quiz, let's figure out which style you're going to be writing in, and then we can really focus on our citations. Essentially what a citation is after a directly quoted or paraphrased content, you're going to include in parentheses a name and a number. And for MLA, it's going to be your page number. For APA, it's going to be your year. There's a little bit more to that, of course, so please review this content. And later on in the week, we're going to have some specialized videos talking about the main difference between MLA and APA. Until we determine which style we are writing in later this week, I do really want you to just be aware of the different techniques of presenting evidence, quotations, paraphrasing, and summarization, as well as techniques for preventing plagiarism, including integrating our sources. So as you review our content this week, I really encourage you to explore that supplemental resources that I present to you. It's really going to help you kind of master these skills. And again, if you have any questions at all on this content, you know how to reach me. Email me, chat, text me, or let's start posting questions in the general discussions forum. Again, we also have an amazing resource available to you guys here, the SNHU Learning Center, the SNHU Online Writing Center, and the Shapiro Library, where you can ask a librarian, is a great resource too, especially clarifying these citations. Additionally, always feel free to ask me any questions at all. Citations is kind of like my thing. I'm a huge dork about it. I love them. And I know them in and out, so if you have any questions at all, let me know and I'll be happy to clarify it for you. We have a lot of activities this week. We've got 4 graded assignments, but the good news is none of these assignments are full-fledged papers, so yay. I do want us to be able to manage our time this week, so let's maybe start reviewing this content early in the week so we can get everything done and continue the conversation about using the correct writing style, making sure our citations are right, and all of that good stuff. We have a couple readings to support understanding our quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing. We've got an activity that kind of helps you move through that process. We have some readings on integrating those sources, as well as an activity to support that. And again, we have our quiz on APA or MLA. That's going to let you know which style you should be using. And then in section 4.8, we have additional supplementary readings, APA or MLA style guides. These activities are ungraded after this reading, but I encourage you to go through them because MLA and APA are a new skill that many of us have not used before. So we really want to use all of the resources that we have at hand and kind of at least scroll through it so get an idea of what these writing styles are asking for. And again, if you have any questions, let's post them on the general questions discussion forum or email me directly and I'll be happy to clarify. We've got a lot of content this week, so let's manage our time, and you guys are going to do awesome. Remember, you've got this, right? Yay, it's encouragement. You guys have this. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me.